Hi guys,
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Where are you? Are you in Volnay?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah.
I've taken a couple of days away from the disaster.
I'm so sorry. Honestly, we've been following along here. It's pretty crazy to just kind of sit back from this perspective and watch.
Yeah, yeah, it's really ugly, but um, that's life, you know. You have when you work with nature, you have to work with nature for good
Yeah.
days and
Mother Nature is
so
tricky.
I'm hooked in like a normal person, like a normal participant, no special status, right?
No, I don't think so. I think, everybody's just slowly starting to join. So we'll get going in 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. The dog is barking in the background.
Oh, can you hear that? It's amazing how I can pick it up. That's down the street somewhere. I was actually going to sit outside and then I realized it's a little risky with background noise. So
Is it warm out there?
it's kind of bizarrely warm. I think it's something like 18 degrees maybe today, which is unusually warm for this time of year. So we can't complain, but at the same time it's still a bit bizarre because, not unlike there, we always end up getting cold temperatures mid-April as well. So
Yeah. Oh well. So you'll be firing the questions?
yeah. I think Adam will do a little there he is. We'll do a little
Hello.
introduction and then, we won't take up too much of your time. I know it's been a crazy week, so have a bit of
Oh,
a
no,
conversation.
it's fine. It's fine. We have to take all the time we need. No
Hello, my
problem.
friend.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so sorry about everything that's going on over there.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of support that we received. I mean, not useful support, I will say, because there's nothing to be done. But at the same time, it's really very comforting. It's very nice to read and hear all the reactions from everywhere in the world.
Yeah. Well,
It's really really rough this year. I mean, it's certainly the most severe I have witnessed myself.
and was there I guess there was probably some bud break before the frost too. I've heard from Ramas.
Yeah, yeah, that's the point. I mean, the part that is before bud break is really still salvageable, but the bud break part is gone. It's and all the Chardonnays, were quite early because we had a very warm week before the week of the frost, and therefore the Chardonnays are, I think, mostly gone. Yeah.
And Pinot, it's
It's still difficult to estimate the damage, but it's very strong damage too. It's very bad,
yeah.
badly hit too. Yeah, but not as bad as Chardonnay. Chardonnay is the worst.
Well, Guillaume,
And
I,
same in the way.
my wife and I are expecting our first kid this year.
We'll save some wine for you. We'll save.
That isn't the important part, but obviously it's something that goes through my mind. So
We'll
I
save,
know I was on the
yeah.
phone with Eddie yesterday, and he suggested that you go after date of conception rather than the birth year.
Than vintage. Yeah, the Halpern family grows. Todd had his Haley had her second baby this or last week as well. So
Last week, my sister had a baby boy,
Good
and
for her.
sorry,
Good for her. I said it's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So second grandchild, and then ours is a baby boy in September.
What do you know the date yet?
The date is September. Well, expected to be September 5th, but I presume it'll be before that.
Ah,
Yeah, so exciting times over here,
but
obviously.
I'm asking because I'm September 19th.
Oh, so there you go.
first are usually late, man.
Virgo.
I'm a Virgo too.
All right, shall we get started?
We shall. I think people are slowly joining, but just for everybody who knows as well, we always post this on YouTube afterwards. So if you miss a little bit, if you're jumping in, if you want to rewatch later, you can always grab it on our channel. But Adam, I'll let you get started.
Well, actually, Sheila, I was passing it back off to you. I saw the note come through, but I can intro. Of course I can. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us, as always, to today's Cru Classe session. My name is Adam Halpern. I'm third generation in my family's importing and distribution business here in Ontario. And as well, I'm joined by my great colleague, Sheila Flaherty. So Sheila, thank you for coming on today. Of course, we are thrilled to have our good friend, Guillaume D'Angerville, joining us. Guillaume, thank you as always.
My pleasure.
And actually, our first Cru Classe ever, which I guess must have been a year ago now, probably
March, probably.
Yeah, almost a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, was with Guillaume and Antonio Galoni. So I know that was a different feeling, Guillaume. I know probably by now you're an expert in this type of arrangement and Zoom session, but the first time we were tasting your 17s together last year. So it's crazy to see where the world is, I guess, today.
Yeah, you were very smart. You were the first ones out of the box a year ago. No one would have guessed that we would be again doing the same thing a year later. I would much rather be flying over to Toronto to present my wines in person, but that's the best we can do for now.
I'm hoping this time next year we can broadcast live from Volnay. So
there it is. There's the view.
So we'll just get started a little bit. Obviously, for anybody that did watch that session last March, is obviously familiar with your wines, the Marquis d'Angerville wines. We've been fortunate enough to visit, and just an incredible property you have in holdings within Volnay. But the reason, obviously, for this session today, which we're very excited about, is to switch gears a little bit and go a little further east from Burgundy and discuss Domaine du Pélican, your relatively new venture. If I remember correctly in reading, it all kind of started with a bottle of wine. Is that correct, in Paris? Is that the story?
Yes and no. Yes and no. If I go back in time, I was looking for something to do outside of Burgundy since maybe 2005, 2006. And I wanted to do something outside of Burgundy for quite a number of reasons. But one of them was I had inherited my estate in Burgundy, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something of my own that would take me out of my comfort zone, so to speak. So it would not be in Burgundy. It had to be something different from Burgundy, yet it had to be close enough from Burgundy that I could say without lying that I was really supervising the estate and the production of the wines. And so I was doing my little, circling of potential regions that I could look into when indeed the question of the bottle of wine came into play, because I was having lunch with my wife at a restaurant we enjoyed very much in Paris. And as always, I tell the sommelier, who's, by the way, who's a Canadian guy, Marco Pelletier. I said to Marco, as always, and but no Burgundy. And he said, yeah, I know the rules. And so a bottle of white wine comes and I look at my wife, Pauline, and she's a very good taster. As you know, mostly women, generally speaking, are better tasters on average, I think, than men. But she's a very good taster. And she and I agreed immediately that it was Chardonnay. And so we said, Chardonnay, and it looks close from home. Marco must have forgotten the rule. So we summoned Marco again, and we said, Marco, we think it's a Chardonnay. We're pretty sure. And we thought we had agreed that there would be no Burgundy. And he said, well, you're right on the grape. It is a Chardonnay, but it's a Chardonnay from Jura. And this was in 2007. And I keep teasing Marco telling him that he's responsible for my move into Jura, because from that day on, I decided that this particular region was really worth a closer look, and that's when I really started my investigations into Jura in 2007. I hired a geologist to help me out there, and we looked at many properties, and it took us 5 years before we made our first purchase there.
Were there other regions that you got close to considering before this, or was this kind of the first that came up and made the most sense?
No, I looked at around Volnay. You could look at Chablis, of course. You could look at Beaujolais, Mâconnais. You could look at Alsace, and you could look at Jura. That's really the perimeter. Alsace was very tempting for the same reasons as Jura was tempting, which is that these are two regions which are relatively close. Alsace was just a touch too far, but relatively close, and yet very different in terms of the possibilities, the opportunities, different grapes, different ways of making wines, very different from Burgundy, very different from what I know home, which was very attractive to me. Alsace would have been great. It was just a bit far, but I fell in love with Jura very quickly after this situation at the restaurant. And Jura is so close from home in terms of driving time. It's just over an hour door to door, and yet it's a really seriously different region from many aspects. 5 different grapes. The soils are similar but different. The climate is very different. Ways of making wines are, plenty of different ways of making wines. The Savagnin grape is a very versatile grape. You can vinify it in many different ways. So plenty of great attractions, and yet a very authentic region, and very small, which was also an attraction versus, for example, Alsace. It's a tiny region, everyone knows each other. It's only 2,000 hectares in total, 2,000 hectares of vines in total. That's the size of two or three villages in Burgundy. So all in all, Jura really came out very quickly, came out as really the destination that we were going to favor. But, we almost gave up, because for 5 years, we looked at properties, and the geologist advisor that I hired always told me there was something wrong about what I was trying to buy. It's too windy, too much to the north, too low too low altitude, whatever. Always had something to say. So I was almost discouraged. And then in 2012, after 5 years of looking, we identified 2 properties which he blessed, and we bought. So that was the beginning. So I'm not so new anymore, I have to say, Sheila.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I think in my mind it's still brand new, but it's time's going by a little too quickly, I think.
Yeah, 2012 is my first vintage over there.
So one quick question I have too is, when you're driving east from Burgundy, how do you really notice, how does the geography and kind of the terrain change as you move towards the Jura? Like, what are a lot of the kind of noticeable differences?
Well, between Burgundy and Jura, there is a river that goes down. It's called the Saône, S-A-O-N-E. And there's that valley. There is a flat land between Burgundy and Jura. So when I drive from Volnay, I drive down the hill from Volnay. Then I have a flat land, which is not interesting for vineyards at all. So there you have you have wheat, you have corn, you have of course also cows and sheep and everything. And then you start reaching Jura, and you start going up the hills again a little bit, and you are on the other side of the bank. And you have to understand that, in fact, Jura and Burgundy were almost at the same level at some point in history, 30 million years ago. And then the valley between the two dropped down. Yeah. So the 2 banks remained facing each other, and the middle has dropped down like 500 meters when the Alps were actually constituted. And so I'm going back in time a lot now. What that means is that the geology on either side of that valley is constituted in the same way, not quite the same way, but similar components, limestone and clay, fallen rocks over Mars, that sort of thing. So that there are comparisons, there are things in common in the two places in terms of geology. But in between, it's very different. It's a flat land with no interest for wine, for vineyards.
And you make, well, I'm sure many people are aware of this, but you make Chardonnay and Pinot in both Jura and in Burgundy. What differences do you see between the two regions in the same grapes? And I know the reason why I really asked is because you said you and your wife were tasting Chardonnay and you thought, oh, well, it broke the rule. And clearly there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah, it's true. It's very interesting because I've now managed to really be a little bit schizophrenic in my approach, and I don't often compare now the two regions as often as I used to when I started in 2012. But it's what I'm looking for. What I was looking for in Jura when I first started there were wines with a personality, with wines which had a story to tell, wines which provided emotions to the drinker. And if you want to broad brush, you would say probably the Pinot of Burgundy is perhaps a little bit more complex, perhaps a little bit more silky, organized, elegant, complete, whereas in the Pinot Noir of Jura is very crunchy. It's like you bite into a black red fruit, that sort of thing. It's a less demanding wine, perhaps in Jura, but has a lot of personality, has an approachability which is very different from Burgundy Pinots. It took me a while to jump over the bridge and decide to make a 100% Pinot Noir cuvée in Jura, precisely because I did not want to fall into the trap of comparing my Pinot from Volnay to my Pinot from Pélican. And I'm glad to report that my Pinot Noir from Pélican is a very, very, very attractive wine. I love it myself. I drink some of it when I have some left because it's been a good success. But it's a wine which, of course, if you wanted to compare it to a Volnay, it would be an unfair comparison. But it's in and of itself, in absolute terms, it has all the ingredients of a pleasant wine because it is an interesting wine with a personality, like I said, a structure, a beauty to it, and some energy also, which I think is quite interesting. As for the Chardonnays, one of my biggest surprises when I started there was that the level of natural alcohol in my Chardonnays was the same level as my Marceau Centenauds and in Volnay. And that was a big surprise because I was expecting that the climate in Jura would be such that it would be more difficult to reach full maturity in Jura than it is in Burgundy. Well, with what happened this week, sadly, we know that even in Jura, there is a very precocious season, and Chardonnay is out, was out, but break was already out last week when the frost hit, and we have a very similar growing season now in Jura than we have in Burgundy. So the wines that are produced there are also have that, the Chardonnay wines that we're producing there also have that personality thing. They're very tense also. They with a beautiful minerality, and that's what really I think was the trap I fell into. I tasted this Chardonnay which was over Mars and had that minerality that made me think of Burgundy as the place where it had been grown, but in fact it was in Arbois.
I remember the first bottle I ever had of it was actually with a group of friends and sommeliers at Le Dilettante, and we were blind tasted on your Chardonnay, and I wish I could remember. I forget which vintage it was, but everybody was around the table, and I think there was probably this half an hour period of this humming and hawing, and I think it ended up being a resounding Grand Cru Chablis Le Clos was what everybody was like, okay, this is, we're not really sure, but we're gonna decide on this. So it was such a cool kind of introduction to the wines. Adam, do you remember when you first did them?
I'm trying to remember. I know before we represented both the Domaine and Pélican. I'm trying to remember the first time. I kind of remember that we might have tried one in Burgundy. It might have been at a lunch, and because we had just finished tasting at your winery. But I can't really put my finger on it. But I know it was definitely early when it coincided with when I tried my first D'Angerville wine. That's that I know. So it was an awesome experience.
Excellent.
Do you, one big question, and what a lot of people have talked about as well, is do you feel that there's an obligation to kind of stick to those regional norms? And you talk about, those practices and these very unique ways of making wine in the Jura, or did you feel like going in, you could kind of have this fresh take on it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. When you move to a different region, you have to be very humble. You think you know how to make wine, but you know how to make wine in your own region, and you have to learn, and your learning curve is still quite steep when you come into a new region. And so the natural fallback position is to start by using exactly the same vinification methods that you use in your home country, in your home region. And that's what we did at the beginning, because we didn't know better, so we applied strictly and fully winemaking techniques that we used in Volnay. And of course, I think the result was very nice, but the result was perhaps less Jurassic. I don't know if that word exists in that context, but you know what I mean. Less from Jura than we would have wanted to, because my objective was to create a winery that was truly, genuinely Jura, and not an outpost of a Burgundy estate, not at all. So, of course, we learned, because we have a lot of friends now in that region over there, and we compare notes like we do in Volnay. We can now do the same thing in Arbois, and we compare notes with our friends. We see how they do things, and we take what we like, we leave what we don't like so much. And of course, it's not a question of accepting the norms. It's a question of adapting in the best possible way to the local terroirs, because that I will never give up. As a Burgundy guy, my primary priority is to let the terroir speak. And I like this idea of adapting what I have to do to what nature gives us, and to what the soil and subsoil will give to the plants and to the grapes. And so as we go along, we move on, we learn things, and we do things, we tweak that thing and not that thing, and we move to something which I think is more and more influenced by local practices. I think that's the right way to answer your question.
Are there any specific, I know you touched on frost a bit, but are there any specific advantages or challenges that you see kind of between each region that has been kind of a part of the learning curve? Yeah,
of course. One thing which is dramatically different is rainfall. And rainfall has a lot of impacts, and we can go through that a little bit. But in rough numbers, it rains twice as much in Jura as it does in Volnay, twice as much. So it's not a small difference. It's very significant. And of course, I'm sure you all know this, but vines hate water at the surface. Underground water is fine, but water at the surface is very bad. So drainage is crucial. Drainage is crucial. So for example, when we purchased our second property, Grand Curoulet, we tried to keep it without uprooting it, but the vines were in such bad condition, we had to uproot them in the end. But we took advantage of that uprooting necessity to redo the drainage entirely. And we discovered, by the way, some very old drainage work that was probably 100 years old, made in stone, beautiful stuff made in stone that we partially reused also. But one of the big challenges of Jura is that water. It rains so much that it gives you very short windows in order to go through the vineyard with the tractors. And sometimes it makes it impossible to go through and to do what you need to do within that particular window. Because of course, when it rains, not possible, but when it has just rained, it's very wet and it's also very difficult. And so it means sometimes we put grass in between the rows so that there's places where the tractors can move on more easily, that sort of thing. So that kind of challenge is definitely there. The challenge that I had expected that did not materialize was reaching full maturity. But of course, with climate change, which was also at the back of my mind, by the way, when we made that move into Jura, with climate change, in fact, Jura, which was like a good 10 days after Burgundy in terms of harvest time, is now overlapping Burgundy. So it's bundling together. It's just incredible.
I know.
Are you, because of the rainfall then, are you more susceptible to, are you seeing more issues with rot, or has that been okay?
So far, we have not had rot. Because since we arrived in 2012, we've been lucky with the seasons, generally speaking, except of course this year with the frost. But generally speaking, we've had the rain that we normally have, but we've had also very good weather at the back of the rain, and so we've never had unsound harvests or crop in Jura over the last 8 vintages now. Yeah.
Well,
so
I'm a suck for storytelling, and whenever I get to taste with you, whether it is virtual but mostly in person, there's always a new story that comes out. One that I think a lot of people might be interested that they don't know a lot about. You obviously mentioned you wanted to go outside your comfort zone when you're looking at Jura for your new project. But technically, I know you grew up in this world, but technically the wine business wasn't where you were really headed. So where I know your story, but many people don't. What were you doing before obviously the passing of your father? What were you doing?
Yeah, well, it goes back to my teenage years when my father told me quite firmly that he didn't expect me to come back to the estate right after school, which when you're 13 or 14, it's not an easy thing to accept from when it's your father telling you this, because you wonder why he's saying this to you. He probably is saying this to me because he doesn't like my company or something stupid like this. But in the end, I took his instructions in consideration, and I chose to go into studying at the business school, which he enjoyed for me, and I enjoyed as well very much. And as a result of that, I became a banker, and I stayed in investment banking for 25 years until my father passed away quite brutally in 2003. So 18 years ago now already. But, at the time before he died, every year I had that conversation with him, and I said to him, Dad, I think I've learned what I wanted to learn about banking. I'm ready when you are. If you want me to come back, I come back. And every year he said, I'm in good health. You're doing well at JP Morgan. You're having a good time. Let's talk again next year. And of course, one year there was no next year to talk. So that's how it happened. And it made it quite brutal. It made it a little bit dramatic because I took a sabbatical from JP Morgan a couple of days before the funeral of my father. And then I never came back from the sabbatical, and I went back to school in the university in Dijon to earn a degree, sort of, in enology, and I had to fill the big shoes left behind by my father, who had been himself harvesting and vinifying 52 vintages in a row. So I was a complete rookie at the time. Of course, I had missed very few harvests myself. Only the years when I was working in New York did I not go back to Volnay for the harvest, but otherwise I was always there. But nonetheless, it's not enough really preparation to run an estate. But I was lucky that my brother-in-law had been working with my father for a few years before my father died, and he agreed to work with me and tell me what he had learned from my father. So there was kind of a transmission there through my brother-in-law. But no regrets, of course, no regrets. I had always planned to go back to the estate. I think my father had always hoped that it would happen too. The optimal plan would have been that he would have been there, still retired, but behind my shoulder if needed. That did not happen, but that's life.
Did you have certain mentors when you went back? I mean, because it is such a small town, such a small community.
Yeah, so like I said, my brother-in-law played a very central role. My brother-in-law is what we call in French an agricultural engineer. He's a scientist by background, and he worked with my father for 15 years, and he knew at the time all the vineyard very well, the plantations, the diseases, the weaknesses of one piece and not that piece, blah, blah, blah. He knew a lot about the estate, and he was a fabulous help and mentor for me. And he agreed to stay alongside me for 10 years after I took over. And also I have some very close friends, in the village. I went to school with Fred Lafarge, who is a little bit younger than me. But when I was living in Volnay as a child, before going to boarding school, he and I went to school together in Beaune, and our respective mothers were taking school runs, alternative weeks, 1 week his mother and 1 week my mother, driving us down to the local city where the school was. So I've known Fred for 50 years and plus. So and I knew his father very well too, who was a wonderful man. And whenever I had a doubt about Pinot, I would go to Michel Lafarge and Fred, but Michel mainly, but because he was the wise man at the time. And for Chardonnay, I'm very close to Dominique Lafont and Jean-Marc Rouleau, and they were very helpful also at the time. And Anne-Claude Leflèvre also. Anne-Claude Leflèvre was a very close friend, and she's the one also who pushed me into going into biodynamic. So I was lucky.
So maybe, with that, I wanted to chat a little bit about biodynamics. You have the same approach to viticulture, I assume, kind of within the Jura as well as in Burgundy, correct? And with biodynamics?
Yeah, of course. When you convert to biodynamics in one place, there's absolutely no way that you could be not in biodynamics everywhere you grow grapes. It's just impossible. It's a philosophy, It's of course it's a way of farming, but it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of listening to nature, of adjusting to lunar cycles, of considering the plant as a living thing. So you cannot be biodynamic in one place and not in another place. So yes, we immediately, in fact, interestingly enough, when we bought the two properties in 2012, we bought 5 hectares from one guy who was in biodynamics already, and 5 hectares from Jean-Marc Brignot, who was a natural wine guy. So he was putting nothing into the vineyard at all, not biodynamics, no chemicals, nothing. So the vineyard was completely clean. when we purchased the Puffney piece a little later, Jacques Puffney was still using lutte raisonnée, some chemicals. He was plowing, but he was still using treatments based on chemicals. But we converted that piece immediately after we took it over. So the estate is entirely biodynamics also over there.
And it's Demeter certified, correct?
It's Demeter certified, yes.
Just speaking of Puffini, I mean, that was obviously quite big news in the wine world when he retired. And did you take over? Were you able to take over all the vineyards from him? Was it a portion or?
It happened in sequence. When Jacques decided that he wanted to retire, and he had he had two daughters, neither of which were interested to continue. Our winery is just down the road from his. It's literally 100 meters down the road from his. So we knew him well because I had been visiting him several times when we first arrived in Jura, because we wanted to pay our respects to him. We had so much respect for him. And so when he came to us for the first time, what can you say other than being incredibly honored and say, of course, we will do our best. And so the first, in the first instance, in 2014, he leased to us about 4.7 hectares. He gave a little bit to his nephew, and he kept a little bit for himself. And then a couple of years later, he gave us another 30.3 of a hectare, but very famous, the very famous Trousseau cuvée, which we now call Béranger, Trousseau Béranger, which he called La Cuvée Bérangère, which is quite a well-known cuvée. He called it Bérangère because he included things with also Trousseau, but from another piece, where we focus it only on that particular piece. So it's a single vineyard cuvée called Les Bérangers, 100% Trousseau. So from Jacques Puffney, we now farm about 5 hectares. Yeah. And it's been an absolutely wonderful experience because all the vineyards are really very close to our own winery. So in an area which we now know and understand quite well. And his own proximity is also a great plus for us because, we chat with him informally, but that's where you learn most about, the way he did things and the way he approached the vineyard and how he sees the season and why he thinks this and these things are going to happen and not that one. So he's a wealth of experience and knowledge, and he's become a friend. Perhaps different generation, so perhaps friend is not exactly the right term, but it feels like it. Yeah.
It's very cool. I love the fact that he's still close by, and at least to have that relationship is pretty special. So
yeah, and spending time in his cellar with him, you think you're going to go for a 10 minutes chat, and then 2 hours later you're still there and you're enjoying the conversation and the wines. He's a wonderful man.
Well, it's actually interesting that you're, just brought up Béranger as well, because I know a few people that are watching today are drinking it as well, which is quite cool. So one of the things that I wanted to ask as well is just in regards to individual vineyard expressions. I mean, are you seeing that becoming a bit more commonplace in the Jura? I mean, are there whispers of potential crus?
Not that I know of, but there's more and more people looking at single vineyard in Jura, and some people were doing it much before we arrived. We're not responsible for that move. We contribute to it because, of course, with our Burgundy background, we want to identify terroirs when they're worth it, and that's what we did. We tried to identify the terroirs which we thought deserved single vineyard treatments, and we decided in 2018 to identify them and produce separate cuvées for them for that good reason. So obviously we have in our own minds, we have our own hierarchy about what would be a cru, what would be a village. But at this point, there's no point, I think, making a specific move about creating a hierarchy in Jura. I think most of my colleagues there know exactly, like we also do. We all know exactly what the hierarchy is and what is worth being treated separately as a single vineyard. And in my case, of course, there's 3 places which deserve a single treatment for sure. And then we've added this year the Pinot Noir as well in 19. But in 18, we produced 2 Chardonnays single vineyard, one in Ambarby, which is a beautiful terroir located at the end of a small valley, surrounded by small hills facing south, very perfect maturity every year, beautiful terroir. And we did one also Chardonnay Grand Cru, which is that big piece we bought from Brignon that I was telling you about earlier, which is about 5 hectares in total. There's one slopey part and there's one top of the hill part. And the Chardonnay is on the top of the hill and the slopey part is used for Savagnin. And so we also produced a single vineyard Savagnin out of that particular terroir, Grand Cru. And we are now also, since vintage 19, we are producing Pinot Noir Clos Saint Laurent, which is the terroir just around our winery. Beautiful name, but also it fits very nicely with the Pinot Noir style, which we wanted to make quite tense, that we wanted to make quite high altitude there. So yes, we will certainly continue in that trend, and it's possible that one day there will be a formal hierarchy in Jura. Now the hierarchy is already in people's minds, but it's not written, cast in stone, so to speak.
It wouldn't be the first time you guys are involved in hierarchies in France. That's a story for another time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So do we want to taste the wines, or what do we want to do?
I think we should probably get into it. And the one thing I just wanted to ask as well is, so obviously you went in knowing Chardonnay and Pinot, which we're going to taste a bit of, but in terms of Poulsard, Trousseau, Savagnin, I mean, how was it beginning to farm those when you started? I mean, certain challenges with them?
Yeah, there are some challenges with each of them. For example, Savagnin has a vegetative cycle which is quite different from the rest of the grapes. It's a much later, generally speaking, much later grape, and it's also a very thick skin grape, very hard to press. So it creates a little bit of a challenge how to press it and how to deal with it at press time. It's also a very versatile grape, very versatile grape. You can do many different things with Savagnin, like I said earlier. But for our own Savagnin, which we call Savagnin Houillet, which is our, generic, so to speak, Savagnin, we take about 1/3 of the cuvée and we keep it to macerate over one night before we press it, so that there is an element of pre-maceration there before pressing. But otherwise, in terms of vinification, it's very similar to what we've known, so no particular challenge there. In terms of the Poulsard, it's a difficult grape to farm also, because it has a very narrow period where it's perfect to pick. It goes it goes very quickly from underripe to overripe. So it's quite a fragile grape, which needs very little movements. And we learned over time that we just leave it alone, during vinification. A lot more than Pinot, for example, which we recycle the juice twice daily. In the case of Poulsard, we just keep it leave it alone and let it happen on its own. And Trousseau is a spectacular grape. Frankly, it's a spectacular grape. It's turning into our grand red wine out of Domaine du Pélican. I think sadly we only have a very small acreage of Trousseau to play with, but it's a magnificent grape. Has a lot of personality, very interesting, beautiful structure, and very present. It's the wine that is present, that you cannot not forget. It's there.
So I know there's a number of people watching, and I know everyone is probably drinking a few different things because we're very fortunate. The wine's just arrived not too long ago, so I think all the deliveries made it out kind of over the last couple of weeks, so just in time for this, which is great. Obviously we've touched on a few of them, but two that we wanted to really feature and taste today were the Chardonnay and the Trois Cepage. And tasting the 18 and 19 vintages together. So I was hoping you can kind of walk us through those a little bit and also let us know how were both of those vintages and kind of what was it like?
Well, I'm going to help myself with a little bit of Trois Cepage 19. 18 and 19 were quite different vintages in terms of the season. 18 in many ways was a dream kind of season. Everything went very nicely, very easily. We had no big problems in that particular season. And we had the fortune to have, at the same time, quite big volume. It was a big crop. And yet we had all the fundamentals in terms of analytics with those big volumes. So we had the right acidity that we wanted. We had the perfect maturity of those wines. And all in all, it turned into a fairly classic, easy to approach, easy to vinify wines, and it shows, I think, in the wines of that particular vintage. In 19, we had a more difficult season, a more complex season to follow because we started the spring also quite early. A little bit like this year, we had frost scares in April, but much less severe than this year, thank God. But still, we had 3 frost scares in the course of April 19, and then the flowering took place in not a great timing. The weather was not perfect. It rained during the flower, and therefore we lost a lot of yield in that process. For a winemaker, for a wine grower, the period of the flower is really very crucial in many ways. And the ideal flowering time is a very compact period, maybe 1 week or 10 days max, and in warm and dry conditions. Well, we did not have that in 19. We did not have that in 19. And then a bit later, end of June, we had the first heat wave. Very, very, very hot weather, and another heat wave also at the end of July. So very irregular, erratic pattern during that particular vintage 19, which is, by the way, sadly has become the norm that it's erratic. It's bizarre to say this in those words, but a lot of time people tell me, what about global warming? And often I respond, not global warming, global disruption, weather disruption. We don't have the seasons one after the other like they used to be. Now we have very erratic situations. We start the spring too early, then we have frost, then we have rain when we expect warm weather and dry weather, then we have heat waves, which we'd never had before. So it's that erratic pattern which makes it complicated. But 19 in the end turned out very nicely because August was fine, was exactly what we needed. Back to normal temperatures, a little bit of rain to improve, reduce concentration. So it turned out fine. At the end, 19 and 18 are 2 beautiful vintages, frankly, with 18 more exuberant and 19 perhaps a little bit precise and pure. That's in broad brush. That's what I would say. But what I have for me in front of me, I realize not everyone has the same thing, but I have the Trois Cepage 19, and Trois Cepage is a cuvée that we started from the first day in 2012. We produced the cuvée of Trois Cepage 2012, which is made out of, like its name says, 3 different grapes. Pinot Noir, about 60%, Trousseau, about 35%, and Poulsard, the balance. And there's nothing, maybe I will disappoint people by saying this, but there's nothing scientific about that particular breakdown. It so happens that when we first arrived in 2012, we put all our red grapes, if you will, in the same vat. We had only like 5 hectares to play with, of which only maybe half was in red grapes, and we did not have enough Poulsard or Trousseau to make a separate wine anyway. So we just put all our grapes together. And by the way, sometimes you have to, because some of those vineyards in Jura, they are what we call co-planted. So that you have 2 vines that are Pinot, and then next to them is a Trousseau vine, then Poulsard, then back to Pinot, then back to Poulsard, and so sometimes they're all mixed in the same vineyard. So anyway, you pick them together. So why not vinify them together? So that's how we created that Trois Cepage cuvée, which we've loved from the first day, because it has let's say, how shall I say this? It has the seriousness of the Pinot. I think you recognize that the fundamentals of this wine comes from the Pinot grape, but you have Trousseau, which provides a bit more structure to the wine. And then the Poulsard is the finesse and the perhaps the funkiness also a little bit, which makes it clearly a red wine from Jura. You cannot, I think you cannot mistake this for a Burgundy wine. This is really truly a Jura wine.
But I love that, though. I love the texture of it. I've always loved that kind of, the crunchy fruit, but also you're right, this kind of serious note as well. What would you say in terms of, have you played around a little bit with ageability on these? And, for people that have purchased them and are looking for their cellar, what's your advice for that?
Well, just a few years ago, I used to budge on those questions and say, it's too early for me to say. I have not enough history to say to talk about ageability. But now I'm starting to be a bit more cocky, I guess, because I still have a few wines from 2012 and 2013 and 14. And, they're 7, 8 years old, and so 9 years old. So it's becoming to be telling something to us. It's telling a story. And frankly, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. To be completely clear, my intention with these wines was to make wines that would be drunk without thinking too much, because I want these wines, like I said, to provide emotions, to have personality, but I want these wines to be simple in the sense that you don't have to think twice before you uncork. It's a great wine, but it's affordable, so open it and see what happens. So I'm not going to stop people from drinking these wines early. That's not my point. But I'm saying, yes, if you have the patience, you will not be disappointed. You will not be disappointed, because these wines age very well. I think the ones that we made, like I said, from 12, 13, 14, which were just plain Trois Cepage, Chardonnay, and Savagnin, they're interesting, and they're getting more interesting now. And of course, the Poulsard, which we started later, is also a wine which is misleadingly looks light and perhaps not able to stay long. But in fact, some very old Poulsards show that ageability of that particular grape is also very strong. And Trousseau, of course, I'm sure it's the same. But here, I won't venture before I have a few years of experience in that particular grape.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say all this because I do want to age them, but they don't tend to last very long in our house. So,
And Guillaume, you know, a lot of people, and I'm sure many here that are already avid Burgundy collectors or wine collectors. What's your advice? You know, obviously, I'm sure I suggest to many people because I am amazed time and time again with your wines, but obviously your opinion on people setting their sights on the Jura region, like Domaine du Pélican, and in terms of advice of collecting or building a collection from this region, what would you suggest how to attack it?
Well, that's a far-reaching question, but I would say that my strong belief is that Jura is now on the radar screen for a good reason. You have to remember that Jura is a tiny region, like I said earlier, but it has a very long history of winemaking. In fact, the region is only 2,000 hectares today, but 150 years ago, it was 10 times that. You know, so there is a long history of winemaking in Jura, and the terroirs are very, very interesting. Now, when you combine this with the fact that they have those 5 grapes, and by the way, the 5 grapes are interesting too because their vegetative cycles being different. When one is hit by frost, the others may escape lucky. You know, so there is an element also of balance there. But when you are a Burgundy lover, there is no reason why you should not be curious about Jura, is the way I would put it. It has, in my view, spectacular potential in terms of winemaking, and it has spectacular winemakers too. By the way, as you know, we're still newcomers from that standpoint. There, we're trying to learn fast, but there is an established crowd of people which we have enormous respect for. We touched about Jacques Buffnet, who is retired, but you know, everyone knows the usual suspects. You know, the Auvergnois of this world, and you know, Gamba and Domaine de la Pinte, and of course Stéphane Tissot. You know, all these people make spectacular wines. Now, when you want to look into Jura, you have to wonder if you can look into Jura without doing the whole spectrum, which includes oxidative wines. And of course, oxidative wines, as you would say, is an acquired taste. You know, it's not an obvious thing that you love at first sight. Some people do, but most people say, "Ooh, is it for me?" In fact, I think I belong to that second group. But my love for vin jaune now is genuine, and so much so that, of course, I am producing vin jaune as we speak. It's not out yet because it needs 6.5 years barreling before it can be produced and labeled as vin jaune. But I am producing oxidative wines because I believe that you don't know Jura until you know what an oxidative wine is. And Savagnin is the grape that is being used to produce the famous vin jaune. And if you're a wine collector and you want to know about Jura and collect Jura, you have to go to Château Chalon and buy some vin jaune from Château Chalon there. There's no question in my mind about that. Of course, you know, if I speak from my own book, I will say that Montigny-les-Arçures, where my winery is the capital of Trousseau. And so if you want to know about Trousseau, which also is a very local grape, very Jura grape, also grown in California by a couple of eccentric winemakers there. Of course, you have to buy Trousseau from Montigny-les-Arçures. And in the same way, Poulsard is mostly grown in Pupillin, which is just outside of Arbois, which is a great place to purchase, for example, from Auvergnois, but very hard to get your hands on wines from Auvergnois.
That's the problem here.
there's a handful of people that are really wonderful winemakers in Jura. They've been making wine for a long time, very much outside the radar screen and selling most of their production locally. But now things are changing. The world is waking to the attraction of Jura, and it's fantastic. And by the way, I always aim to promote Arbois before I promote Domaine du Pélican, because I owe now the region of Jura and I owe the appellation Arbois a great deal, because they've welcomed me with open arms and they've been so wonderful to me that it's the minimum I can do to participate in the promotion of the region as a whole, as opposed to just my own estate.
Just speaking about the more oxidative styles, one of the wines that we didn't touch on, I'm not sure if anybody is drinking it today. If you are, just throw it in the chat because I'm very curious. But the Macération, the Pelliculaire, do you mind speaking to that one super quick?
Yeah, that's a funny one, because my partner in Jura, François Duvivier, he's also my régisseur in Volnay. I hired him in Volnay 15 years ago, and we became very close, to the point that I said to him that if I was going to venture outside of Burgundy, I wanted to do it with him, and I made him my partner there in Arbois. And he made that cuvée a little bit behind my back, So, but I was not upset for long because it was a great success. But I was telling you earlier about Savagnin being such a wonderful grape because it is so versatile, and you can do you can do Savagnin houillé like I do, which is a top Burgundy style, not oxidative wine. You can do oxidative wines, which is not vin jaune. You can mix Savagnin with other grapes like Chardonnay. Jacques Puffney used to make a cuvée called Sachard, Sa for Savagnin, Char for Chardonnay, which was a blend of the two, which was fantastic. And you can also make orange wine out of Savagnin, which is this Savagnin Macération Pelliculaire. It's the scientific description of an orange wine. It's simply a white wine made as if it was a red wine. So in other words, I'm sure you know this, but just for background, normally white wines ferment with juice only, without the skins, so that the color is white. But macération pelliculaire is when vinification happens with the skins, like we do from fermentation of red grapes generally. So that gives the wine, I would say, additional texture, additional structure, presence, but at the same time, the character of the grape remains firmly there. There is that tension to the wine, which is wonderful. And we produced only like 2,000 bottles of that wine in 2018, and they were out the door in minutes. And we produced a little bit more in 19, but now we're going to be growing that cuvée because the response is far greater, far more solid than we thought it would be. We thought it would be something reserved to an audience that would be, kind of at the edge, the risky types, the not risk averse types. But in the end, the audience is much wider than we thought it would be.
Well, we were very happy to get a little bit this year. It didn't last very long, of course.
Yeah, and of course, with that same grape, we chose to make our first bubbly wine. My
next question.
Yeah. Oh, so sorry.
No,
sorry.
we were very, very curious about this.
Do you want me to rewind and you can cut?
No, you continue. You're making my life easy.
No, we wanted to make a bubbly also out of Jura because, like I said, we want this to be a truly Jura estate. And in every Jura estate, there is a Crémant du Jura. But since we are who we are, we chose to make it slightly different from others. And we chose to make it 100% out of the Savagnin grape. We thought the idea of having a bubbly, which came from this very aromatic and very acidic grape, would make a very interesting bubbly. But yet, and this is kind of welcome to France session, there is a bizarre rule in Jura, which is that in order to be allowed to call a bubbly from Jura a crément, it has to have a minimum content of either Pinot or Chardonnay. And since our bubbly is 100% Savagnin, it cannot be called Crément de Jura. And we couldn't care less about this, frankly. We love our bubbly, and we think it's a very smart thing to do it from a particular grape, 100% from that particular grape. And that's why we called it Cuvée Brut S0, S for Savagnin, but we're not allowed to say what the grape is on the label, but S is not the name of the grape. And 0 is for zero dosage, it's not no dosage. So we use a combination of vintage 18, a little bit of vintage 19 into it in order to allow the fermentation in the bottle. And the result, I think, is really wonderful because it's very fine bubbles. It's very tense wine, not at all sweet, very dry, very brut, and frankly eminently affordable. So
we're very excited. I think Neil was just asking in the chat, but we received our first allocations. I'm not sure if this year, I'm assuming end of this year or next year.
Well, we're going to be releasing 19s probably early fall here, maybe mid-fall. And then we actually have some additional 18s that we're going to be bringing to market. But I know with the sparkling, I don't know if we've discussed any allocations there yet, but we'll get to that later.
No, we have some coming.
Adam, if you want some, you can have some.
Of course. Of course.
One question that I didn't address, I should have just before we wrap up, is Matt asked the name, Domaine du Pélican. Where did it come from?
Domaine du Pélican. I would love to take the credit for this great name, but it's my friend Francois who found it. But the legend is that. Well, let me step back. The city of Arbois has a pelican on its crest. So the arms of the city is a pelican in Arbois. It's very odd, yeah. And so the next question, of course, is why has Arbois a pelican on its crest? And the story is very interesting for us because it mixes Burgundy and Jura. Without sounding pedantic, but Mary de Bourgogne, who was the daughter of Charles le Téméraire, the Duke of Burgundy, Mary de Bourgogne was married to Maximilian de Habsburg, who was from the Austria-Hungary Empire, which owned also Jura at the time. Yeah, so it was a great marriage between two very powerful regions of the world. And Mary and Maximilian, one day at the end of the 15th century, made a trip to Arbois. And at the time, it was a very fashionable thing to walk around with an exotic animal on leash, like an ostrich or a monkey or a pelican. And so they had a pelican on leash, Mary and Maximilian. So they were walking around Arbois with their pelican. And of course, it was the middle of winter and the pelican did not like the cold and died during the trip in Arbois. And so the city of Arbois was in shame and was worried that the emperor and Mary de Bourgogne would have a bad memory, if you will, of their trip to Arbois. And they said, Your Highness, we will never forget your pelican because we will put it on the crest of the city. And from that day on, the crest of the city of Arbois was a pelican. And to that they added, because there's also a Christic symbol in the pelican, which piques its own heart to feed its babies. That's what's on the label. You see those red dots on the label. That's the pelican piquing its own heart to feed its babies. Yeah, and the motto is, so I do for those I love. So I do for those I love. I will spare you the Latin translation of that, but it's written in Latin on the capsules And so we felt it met entirely what we were trying to achieve. It's a great way to link together the story of Burgundy and the story of Jura. It's a name that works extremely well in many different languages. So it met a lot of our constraints, and also it had never been used before. That the name, even though there's pelicans everywhere in Arbois, no one had ever taken the name to put it on their estate. So it was free. So
It's
we
an
took
incredible story.
Yeah, it's a bit of luck there, but I don't deserve any of the credit for that one. It's really François who had that idea.
Well, we can't thank you enough for, I know it's been a wild week, and I really, really appreciate, I think we all really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. We're incredibly thrilled every time these wines arrive. I mean, I know the sales team and all of our customers get very, very excited. If anybody is curious, there is a bit left, not too much, as it just came in early last week. There's a bit of the Trois Cepage. I think we have a few bottles of Poulsard left and some Chardonnay. But if you are curious at all, you can always, actually, I'll just throw the email in the chat. Sales at Halpern Wine. You can always send us a note. We can let you know what we have available. And then, as Adam said, the next vintages will be arriving towards the fall. So keep an eye open for that. Guillaume, we cannot thank you enough. This was awesome. It was great to talk to you as always.
We most definitely miss you. We most definitely miss you here, and we most definitely miss being with you over there.
We will be back. We will be back there as soon as we can, I assure you.
I miss you too, and I want to take this opportunity to say that this is the kind of relationship which I enjoy most. Dealing with Halpern has been a fantastic experience for me, and I look forward to the years to come with you guys.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll keep well, and we'll chat soon. Thank you everyone for joining today.
Ciao.
Next, I will just say one quick thing is we'll be sending out an email tomorrow. Next Saturday, we are going to have the Nonino family on, speaking about all things beautiful distillates from Northern Italy. So keep an eye open for that. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Adam. Thanks.
Bye.